for Flaboonga Monthrothacube. With Dale and Tony breaking all the rules. Talking tech, biz, and straight up chaos. Quick fire guests, oh yeah, we slay those.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Stevenson, and this is a Flaboonga Monthrothacube. I'm flying solo today. Unfortunately, Dale cannot be with us. Oh, Marcus has tuned in and said hello, Tone and Toon, which I quite like before I'd even finished the intro. So, hello to you, superfan Marcus Batson. I have with me our fabulous guest, John Toon. John, for our listeners who don't know you, I'm sure there's probably none out there, but just in case. Can you introduce yourself for us, please?
Yeah, of course. And Tony, congratulations on not fucking up the intro. You did really well on that, on the getting the name right and saying it properly and everything else. Dale's clearly been coaching you.
You also know how in the intro jingle that we've got that it pronounces it completely wrong, but yeah, we love it. So I've just left it in there because it's part of the brand, right?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know me, clearly Marcus knows me well, almost intimately, it seems at some points. Yeah, I'm John Toon, work for Beaver and Shutters. We're a mid-sized firm based out of Manchester, and I lead all of our tech strategy and everything that goes along with that. So IT, digital transformation, advisory services for clients, data, software development, anything that kind of has any kind of technology ring to it, it kind of comes to me, and that's my gig.
Very nice, very nice. And in terms of other interests, you've got a few other bits and pieces that kick around in your world, right? Care to share?
Yeah. So I guess the key one is obviously the podcast. So we do with Ryan and Indy, we do a weekly podcast that goes out talking about all things accounting technology, particularly focused on the UK, but we do have an international audience that goes out on a Monday every week, and Lee Stallard helps us to kind of make it sound professional and not completely rubbish. And then alongside that, we have the weekly sort of digest of news that goes out alongside that, which is a live stream on a Thursday, plus a newsletter if you want to sign up as well. And you can find all of that on our Digitals website and the Digital Disruptors website. Plus, we have an awards coming up in a couple of weeks just before Accountex North. So it's our second year doing it. We wanted to kind of do something a little bit different from normal awards insofar as you don't self-nominate, you have to be nominated by someone else. And then we have a committee of judges that kind of go through those submissions and kind of assess, who should or shouldn't be, getting those awards and things like that, and chopping that shortlist down to something that we want to shout about.
And you are nominated for one of the awards at your own award show, aren't you? Is that right?
I am, because one of my team is a piss taker and decided to put me up for an award, which I was really horrified about. And
your team at Beavers and Struthers, or was it Ryan or Indy?
No, it was one of my team at Beavers and Struthers. Really yeah, one of my team, and I was like, you asshole. So yeah, happy days. And I think I got shortlisted as well, which is even more horrifying. So yeah, that's
you were shortlisted, mate. You know you were shortlisted.
Well, do you know what? I know I'm shortlisted because Lee sent me a message saying you've been shortlisted with the image that I've got to post on LinkedIn that I've not done yet.
Can you nudge? Yeah. And obviously you have a panel of independent judges that judge who should be shortlisted, right? So we can make sure that separation and nepotism is firmly put to bed. I do have a vague inkling that Dale might be one of the judges, so that just feels like some quite nice full circle moment of pods and other pods and your awards. So yeah.
Well, we try to play nicely. I mean, obviously, there's lots of other people in the space that doing things to kind of help get people into the accounting technology market and the opportunities, not just technology, but the opportunities that go with it. And so we've got Aaron Patrick's involved with the awards, and we do a live stream with him, and he's got a great podcast and does a whole bunch of exciting things, particularly if you're using Intuit QuickBooks. We've got the six-figure bookkeeper crew involved as well. So as long as we keep them too plied with wine, they're fairly compliant, and they do what we ask most of the time. And that's really cool. So it's nice to have the two of them along as well. And obviously we have Dale involved, and you're involved through your kind of connections with Free Agent anyway, Tony. So it's all good.
Indeed. I like the thrust behind it of making it sort of as independent as possible, because that's not always the case with awards, right? Not just in the accountancy industry, in other industries as well. There's varying degrees of separation between independence and it not maybe being quite so independent in other cases. Not pointing fingers at anybody in particular, but I like that because I think it's a nice opportunity for folks to come together with an independent body that recognizes the contributions that individuals such as yourself make.
Thank you. I mean, I think the one thing on that is that, from a firm point of view, obviously we're interested in awards because it's a great marketing opportunity, and it's great to be able to promote yourselves and promote the work that you do. And so there's absolutely a place for kind of those awards events and stuff. And we're up for an Accounting Excellence Awards, for example, in a few weeks as well. And that's a self-nominating process. And then obviously there is a judging process. There is a level of independence. It's not like you just put your money down and you get a win as a consequence.
Forward your check into the.
and believe me, I think as a firm, we've definitely been in that place with some of the more regional awards in the past, where we've won, I think, Northwest Accountancy Firm of the Year award about 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember when I joined, we'd won it about 4 years on the trot, and I was like, this either no one else is entering or there's something weird going on. So there are elements of that, but I mean, we wanted to do something absolutely different, which was around asking the community out there to contribute to people or vendors or technology or whatever that they thought match the objectives of the awards that we wanted to give out, because I think sometimes that voice of the community isn't always heard, and also we're not always at the coalface, and we can't be across everything, so we can't be into all of the products and seeing what's good and what's bad, and being really being able to, I think what we're really interested in is being able to express how the accounting and bookkeeping community in particular feels about technology vendors and whether or not you guys are doing a good job or not. And equally wanting to talk about and promote high profile people in the industry who are really cutting through and making impact with those people as well, because I think that is really difficult to gauge from the outside looking in if you don't have a good feel for what's going on and you don't have your finger on the pulse, which for a lot of people, it's almost impossible to keep your finger on the pulse because you just spread yourself way too thinly.
Yeah, absolutely right. And there's a lot of noise and big marketing budgets that will help to amplify that noise. But yeah, I kind of oscillate with it, and sometimes I go through periods where I'm super excited about the change that's happening and like the new stuff that's coming, and that's usually my default. And then other times I kind of can get a little bit disillusioned by it because it just feels like, how do I keep up with it? And I want to, because I want to know about this stuff, and you have to kind of have places to go to. And it wasn't that long ago that you didn't have Digital's and the Cruel World and Aaron and Johan and and all the other folks out there that Jason Stats from across the pond that were talking about this stuff and talking about it with opinions behind it, right? And trying to disseminate this this information into something that was usable and independent and not coming necessarily directly from the horse's mouth, because we're always going to say our products are good if we're behind them and that's who we work for, right? And it just so happens that a lot of them are, but still it's nice to have that extra voice behind it that gives just a place to go and tune in. And I think for anyone that hasn't caught up with John, Indy and Ryan and Lee, or Johan and Aaron for that matter, recommend it if it's something that you feel that you want to sharpen up on, is kind of what's going on now, right? We've got all the stuff that sort of happened before, but the stuff that comes through that channel, a lot of it. So Dale's not here, so Dale's a really big fan of pattern interruption and just asking questions that perhaps the guests weren't expecting. And one of the favorite questions that he likes is which is your favorite child? I'm not going to ask you that. So what I am going to ask you is who's your favorite co-presenter?
Who's my favorite co-presenter? Oh, that's easy. That's Indy. That's really easy.
I thought it might be, but I just thought we'll get it on a nice little snippet which you can cut up and share on socials.
only because she and I are probably more similar than myself and Ryan. Ryan is like the he's the organizer of the three of us, to be fair.
Okay, yeah.
And so he's the one. I mean, he also gets up really early in the morning, which irritates me massively because I'm not a morning person. So I will wake up and I'll have like, you know, WhatsApp messages or Slack messages from him at like sort of from like 6:30 in the morning, which is incredibly unacceptable because 6:30 in the morning is the time that you get up to go for a flight for a holiday. You know, that's my only reasoning for getting up at that time. Is
that correlated with the fact that he has a young his son? Is it?
He's got a very young son and a daughter as well. So yeah, he does. But he's just a morning person. So he doesn't like it if Indy and I sort of say, "Can we record the pod at like 9 o'clock at night?" Because he's getting ready for bed, and we're sort of just about coming alive by then. So, but yeah, he's the the man that manages us effectively, and of course, Indy and I push back as much as possible on that. So
of course, absolutely.
He's already sent me 2 messages this morning about the awards and wants to know where we're at with ticket sales and numbers and various other things, and I haven't yet actually had a chance to look and sort of answer his questions. So yeah, we'll get there.
I was going to say that you're the one that's got him pulling his hair out, but that one's past, I think. Yeah. Sorry, Ryan, if you're listening.
Long since gone.
I don't actually know if Ryan, I imagine he probably has been on the show in the past, before I was co-hosting with my man D-Rod. Well, we've obviously had you on. We had Lee on a couple of weeks ago as well, which was a lovely chat.
Yeah.
Me and Lee go way back to Zero days when we both worked at Zero at the same time. And I don't know if we've had Indy on or not. Is the honest.
Not sure. I saw the one with Lee. Lee was really good. I was very impressed. He's kind of like the silent partner with our arrangements and stuff. So it's really good. And then he comes up with these incredible ideas, which are just really, really great.
He's a great guy and somebody that I rate highly in our world. I think he's always very calm. He's always got like good thoughts on things. He definitely wants to move things in the right direction. And I just like the way he goes about his business. I think he's, like you said, sort of quietly very insightful. And we should get him on more stages and hear more from him because I think he's got some interesting stuff to say. Hence why we got him on.
For sure.
Felt like he'd been quietly waiting to be asked for a long time, and I'm like, mate, don't ask. Just send me the link, you know. Yeah, cool. Okay, let's go for a serious question, bookended with a less serious question. Now, I've noticed that you are good at calling out bullshit in our world, mate, because you're known for it, right? You're known for your spiky point of view occasionally, and I just wondered if there was any coincidence between the initials of Beavers and Struthers, BS, and the fact that you like to call it out. I don't know. Is that could it be? Was it just you naturally gravitated towards that? I don't know.
Maybe that is. I mean, it hasn't. Yeah, it hasn't gone unnoticed that's the initials.
Okay, I'm not the first one then.
But yeah, I mean, it was quite funny because obviously when Ryan was working in practice, he used to work for Scrut and Bland, so it was SB. So we had like BS and SB.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's quite interesting. But no, I mean, I think I've always been like this, and I guess as my profile sort of got a little bit bigger, my mouth has probably got a little bit bigger as well.
And then you amplified it 10x because you've got a bigger megaphone.
Which then the marketing and the HR teams at work get a little bit fraught about because they're like, oh my god, like,
John's live again.
What's he saying? Like he's obviously on his high horse, he's on his soapbox again. So I do occasionally get in trouble with them, and I do occasionally have to like wind my neck in. But I mean, you know, for me, it comes with the territory. It's, you know, part of my own personal brand, and I do fully appreciate that I represent, you know, other organizations, and you've got to respect that, and you've got to be, you know, honest and truthful. And you know, most of the time, I think that I don't go after particular things or particular people because I have a particular vendetta or I've got a particular, you know, anything personal. It's really just about the fact that I just don't, you know, I am literally calling out bullshit, you know, or just sort of saying, look, you know, you might have a great marketing team and a great press release, but actually when you cut through the noise, it's just nothing.
What before we get on to the question that I was going to ask you, which was about the merger and what's going on at Beavers and Struthers, what irks you at the moment in the world? I might regret asking this question, but like in our world, like without pointing fingers at anyone specifically, but just like what do you see out there that you think isn't quite as it should be, or like hasn't moved on as we'd like it to have done, you know? Like
I mean, I think the one overriding thing that irks me and has done for a long time is I think the quality of the profession still hasn't risen as much as I think it could have done. You know, and I'm not, you know, that's not to sort of get into a debate about, you know, qualified versus non-qualified, or however you want to describe it, or anything else. I actually think that, you know, regulators like ICAW, ACCA, etc., AAT are not doing enough of a good job to remove poor accounting, you know, practices and people who just aren't simply up to date and aren't keeping up to date with things enough. I also think that the flip side of that as well is that as a voice, as an accounting industry, we don't have a collective voice. It's really disjointed and fractured. You know, and so all that you ever see really is negative news stories, and typically it's around audit because it's the kind of stuff that hits the press. But because we've got, you know, ICAW, ICAS, ACCA, AAT, ATT, you know, SIPFA, SEMA, etc., there is no like one collective voice for accounting in our UK market, and so what that means is like it's everybody else's problem to kind of, you know, shout from the rooftops about how good we are and what kind of impact we can have, you know. And obviously it kind of comes and goes, and we've got, you know, great people like Will Farnell and Martin Bissett and others who've been able to kind of articulate that and articulate what kind of impact firms can have and accountants and bookkeepers can have on business. But I just feel like because we're so unstructured, because we're so fractured in terms of, like, you know, having that kind of collective voice, it just means that the message is diluted way too much. And so the negative news stories run through and cut through way better than the positive news stories. And you know, there is an irony, of course, insofar as, you know, we're bound by a whole bunch of regulation and ethics and confidentiality and stuff, which means that you can't talk about the good news stories, where you know, where, for example, maybe you have helped a business avoid some kind of fraud, but they wouldn't want to kind of talk about it and promote it so much, and you're restricted about that. If you take, I was talking to Ian Pay at ICAW yesterday about this, and saying, you know, the WH Smith story, which has come out, which is, you know, this issue around the US operation, and there's an accounting problem over there, which is to do with rebates, and it's quite a technical issue, you know, and it's PwC, the auditors, that identified the issue. Deloitte were the previous auditors, and for whatever reason, it's gone unnoticed, and it's really difficult to know why. Potentially, it may well be that the US operation wasn't material enough to even be considered when the UK operation was around. But try explaining that in a public forum, to say, do you know what? This problem was never a problem because it wasn't material, because it wasn't big enough. But all of a sudden, it has become a problem. The auditors have changed, and you know, and the new auditors have identified and flagged this as a problem. And now you've got to go back retrospectively. It's had a market impact in terms of share price and other things. And the irony being that PwC, as the auditors, can't go in and fix the problem, so they've had to go back to Deloitte, or the previous auditors, to provide the consultation and the works to get in and do the technical requirements. And I think what happens then is, when you look on that and you reflect on that, it's like, well, how's the market working? You know, you've got new auditors who've come in and spotted a problem that may or may not have existed before they were there, but because of some technicalities around whether or not it was worth looking at from a previous auditor's point of view, you know, that's a really difficult message to get into the market for people, for a layperson who doesn't understand audit and accounting and everything else. And then the fact that you've had to go back to the previous people who doing the audit and so supposedly missed that problem and messed up, that you know, that the optics just don't look great. And you know, that is the challenge that we have in the market, is that people just, you know, we've got this knowledge gap and this understanding gap. It's the same when it comes to fraud. You know, apparently accountants and bookkeepers and auditors are the policemen when it comes to identifying financial fraud, and yet we're not. We have obligations, and we have whistleblowing obligations, but we're not there to kind of troll through every single transaction down to the micro level to go and try and identify fraud. You know, and yet that's the perception I think most people have.
Do you know what one that gets me is when you're a really good point, I think, and it's interesting you pointed about that, like there being one unified sort of voice. I think it's an interesting topic that I will ruminate on over the next few weeks, I think. I find it interesting when you get that, and you'll feel this, right, as someone that understands accounts and that kind of stuff, when you get somebody who wants to talk about that kind of stuff but doesn't actually have a background in it, but they've got a platform. And you get like lay people talking about tax issues because they've spotted a loophole, which isn't a loophole, it's just breaking the law. And it's interesting, like there was one I saw yesterday, and it was a semi-prominent figure of like, you know, further your life, further yourself, and they put this post up about essentially how they ran holidays through their business.
I saw that.
Yeah, you see it, and Alan Broom's fabulous takedown comment, which I did think was top drawer, Alan. And I know Alan a bit, and he's a very good guy, and he's got a great turn of phrase, and we need to have him on actually. So sorry, Alan, I haven't invited you on yet because you are on my list of people to invite on. But yeah, just that I kind of enjoy it, but it's also a bit cringe, and you get it on some of the bigger podcasts, don't you, when you get folks going on and sort of like they'll come in it from a social perspective rather than from a technical perspective, and then there's always the nuance, and actually you wonder whether they're that what you're talking about accountants being able to get out into the wider world at a scale better through that, you know, through that type of communication might help to raise the bar of education. I know there's people out there like you know,
well, you've got people like Rachel Harris out there.
And Abigail Foster was the one I was going to say, but yeah, Rachel as well. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the challenges as well. Is that, you know, yes, you do get people who kind of promote all sorts of random stuff. I mean, you know, you've always got people like Gary Stevenson. You know, a guy's an absolute genius. You know, incredible background, incredible story. And yet he's going around promoting, you know, a wealth tax. And then if you kind of listen to, you know, people like Dan Needle and others, and sort of look at what's been done around the world when it comes to wealth taxes, they're proven not to really work. Or if they are to work, you have to do it as like a bit of a one-off. It's a windfall tax that you can kind of do every 10 years or whatever. And that kind of nuance.
The Diary of a CEO when they've got Gary Stevenson and Daniel Priestley on, and Daniel Priestley asks like, how much would that yield? And it's, you know, like not that. Well,
I just don't watch stuff like that because I'm just not interested in like these supposedly, you know, like, yeah, it's like soap operas. I don't watch those either because like, they're just rubbish. So I don't really get involved in too much of that kind of stuff. But I think that's the problem. I think my other thing is that you quite often the people who do get quite high profile in our space, you know, kudos to them. You know, like incredible hard work and you in some cases like incredible marketing machines as well from a personal brand or a business brand point of view. But I think quite often as well, what it's really difficult to cut through the noise of is like, are they actually a good accountant? You know, is what they're saying, apart from, you know, some of the sound bites and some of the stuff in terms of promoting accountancy, which is absolutely valid and really, really appreciated, is like actually in terms of like some of the detailed stuff that comes out from them is like, is it actually any good and the quality any good? Because I've seen some things that have come from some high profile people in our marketplace, and it's rubbish, you know, frankly. And that doesn't help them because again, it doesn't give the right perception into the broader marketplace insofar as, you know, look, we're supposed to be here to provide quality advice, reliable advice, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And if you don't do that, what's going to happen? Everyone just goes off and uses ChatGPT, and that just helps to erode our marketplace even further.
Which segues us nicely into actually it doesn't segues us nicely into me asking a daft question, because we haven't had enough daft questions yet, and then we'll come back to what I was going to ask about, which was a sensible question. So me and Dale have a bunch of these standard stock questions that we ask people, and they center almost exclusively around snacks and fictional characters. And there's a new one that we've been trialing over the last couple of weeks, which is when you are out and about and you are on the motorway doing a long schlep and you are forced into a meal deal, what is your meal deal?
Told
you there was going to be nonsense, mate.
Yeah, so to be fair, I don't really do meal deals because I'm too lazy to actually figure out what goes into a meal deal. You know, I'll just go and grab when you kind of like I was in London yesterday, and I came back and I dropped into M&S at Euston before I jumped on the train, and of course it's got the whole thing where it's like, oh, grab a meal deal, and it's like a sandwich, a packet of crisps, or a bottle of water or whatever, and what I ended up grabbing was a pasta salad, some cookies, and one of those like massive bags of crisps. And yes, I did eat all of them on the way back. So that didn't fit into the meal deal. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's just like it's too much admin. Like I just can't be bothered.
Meal deal, yeah, unless it was in a bag. Yeah.
Like if it was, literally, like when you get those kind of like those takeaway boxes in the supermarkets where it's like Indian takeaway for two. Like which most of the time I can't eat because I'm allergic to nuts. So it's like there's always like it's like food lottery for me. But yeah, if it was like that and it was a meal deal in a bag, yeah, I'd do it. But like the fact that I've got to visit multiple shelves and multiple areas to kind of do that and put it together and figure out what am I saying, I can't be bothered. Don't have the time in my life to be doing that.
So your answer is I conscientiously object to the very essence of a meal deal, and I will happily pay a premium to not engage with your nonsense M&S foods.
Pretty much.
Let's go. I like that.
Yeah.
It's a very, very, very good answer. I like that one. We will come back to some more nonsense questions after the question I was going to ask, which was we talked before we went on air a little bit about AI. And so I'm just going to throw the floor open to you on that subject. Your thoughts, your feelings, your hopes, your dreams, your fears. Where do you think we'll be in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years time? How's it going to impact the profession? Just go, mate. Go nuts.
First thing I would say is timescale projections are impossible to answer because like everything's changing so quickly, and we genuinely don't know kind of like where the next like technical breakthrough will come, whether that'll be provided by some of the models that we're seeing like OpenAI or Claude or whatever, or whether it'll be a vendor maybe like yourselves that come along and sort of do something transformational. So trying to kind of predict this and say this is where we'll be at next September, for example, is impossible. What I would say though is that we've got this big continuing focus at the moment on large language models. This broad base knowledge-based things which are basically Google on acid, and just absolutely amazing, incredible technologies can do all sorts of stuff. But actually the real focus from a technical point of view and what we're seeing from specialists is the move to small language models, so SLMs, and this is go around niche focus things. You've kind of got this in a way with things like BlueJ and a couple of other products that are in our market where they're doing like tax advice and scooping up information from HMRC and from the courts and from the tribunal processes and all the other stuff that goes with it. But actually the moment they're actually powered by large language models with a kind of a bolt on over the top. But what we're going to start to see is like bespoke small language models which are designed around a particular issue, particular topic, and those potentially will kind of superpower that kind of stuff, and is going to be like interesting because it's going to potentially challenge us in the market even more. Because if you've got a vendor that comes along, let's say it's Free Agent 3.0, and you decide to become a small language model providing tax advice to all and sundry, you could do that commercially and open it up, and you could really challenge our market. So I think we need to be sort of prescient of that. We need to be conscious that that's kind of coming down the track. I guess it's no different in some ways to the disruption that we've already seen with large language models, but that's kind of what we're going to see. There's a ton more that we can do on automation, when it comes to how we use, any kind of AI technology and models. And I think the real challenge in our market again is that we've got this really wide gap between kind of like the firms at the very top end, at the bleeding edge of our market, and the firms like right down the bottom end, whether they're accountants or bookkeepers. And I think it's kind of, it's on regulators, it's on technology vendors, it's on ourselves to kind of encourage people to move along that path and move along that journey. And I think one of the reasons why people don't often do that is because they don't have it in their strategy. They don't think about technology and AI as part of their strategic objectives. And so what happens is they're passive. They're maybe putting their heads in the sand, or maybe they're just not thinking about it. And that isn't a strategy. You can have a strategy that says
it's not a strategy.
Yeah, well, you can have a strategy that says I want to be a late adopter. That's absolutely fine by me. I'm not going to judge you whether you're an early adopter or a late adopter in terms of that. But what I am going to judge you on is if you don't have a strategy. And I say this to all of the accountants and bookkeepers that I meet when we start talking about AI, and they're sort of like, they say to me, "What are you doing, and how are you doing this?" And my immediate question is like, what's your strategy? What do you want to do? How do you want to bake AI into your business if you do want to bake it in? And are you going to be led by the large language models and kind of figure it out your own way and maybe come up with your own GPTs and all sorts of other things? or are you going to be vendor led and a bit like we did with cloud technology and buy it from people who are creating these incredible pieces of technology that help save us time? All of this needs to be in your strategic thinking and part of what you do when you run your practice, and not just be, like I say, be passive. I think there's loads of opportunity, but there are loads of challenges, the big thing that a lot of people obviously are starting to talk about now is like skills. What are we going to be doing about skills for particularly junior staff to get them into that place where they can learn things that need to be learned? And again, my big challenge on this is that we seem to, as accountants and bookkeepers, we just get absolutely like wedded into like double entry. It's like, oh, everyone's got to learn how to do double entry bookkeeping, because that's the foundation of accounting. That's the bread and butter. And if you don't understand it, you don't know how to do it, you won't be able to be a good accountant or whatever. Which I think is nonsense, because if you go to the Big Four and you go into the audit department at like KPMG, for example, I can guarantee you that hardly anybody in that department will understand the fundamentals of double entry bookkeeping. They'll never have touched the books.
Deal and clip, yeah.
But they're bloody good auditors. For all of the bad press that these firms get and stuff, they really know like financials. They really know like big business and stuff like that. And so here's my analogy that I tend to use when I talk about this is, you and I, Tony, are old enough to probably remember like when we learned to drive, some cars still had manual chokes and they had all sorts of other random crap in the background that you had to deal with. And you sit on the drive trying to start the car and you'd flood the engine and then couldn't get it going. No one in their 30s or younger has ever had to deal with a manual choke in a car, will never have seen one, won't really understand what it is and what it does. And like when we think about, talking about kids before, like my daughter's 14, when she starts to learn to drive in 3 years' time, the prevalence of vehicles on the road are going to be automatics. They're probably majority, maybe not the majority, but they're going to be probably electric as well. She will never, ever have to learn how to drive a manual shift gearbox. And yet she can still take a car from A to B and enjoy hopefully a safe journey if she learns the right skills. And for me, that's what we need to focus in on as an industry is like, how do I get from A to B, whatever that journey is, and do that safely in accordance with the regulations and in accordance with the law and everything else, and do that. And does it mean that we need to learn old skills that are no longer relevant, or do we still need to know some of those skills? And that's a conversation that we need to be having.
And where do you think it's a really interesting point, right? So if you take a scale of like, we have no technology, therefore you need to rely 100% on deal clip and double entry bookkeeping and handwriting T-sheets, and then on the other end we've got machines that just do it, and they do it 100% of the time correctly, perfectly, right? There's some spectrum within there of like, we'll probably never get to this point because that's just not the nature of how things operate, right? There's always going to be a requirement for some human intervention. Like, where do we sit on that spectrum? Like, how much less important now is it knowing the real fundamentals of bookkeeping versus like actually being able to use the technology that's available or that is coming down the pipe?
I mean, I think again, it comes down to what do we want to do as an industry, and I wonder if we maybe need to like think more. At the moment in our marketplace, we have this very broad blending of bookkeeper versus accountant, and I'm not trying to pitch the two sort of groups against each other, but what I kind of mean with that is that as an accountant, like I can do bookkeeping, right? I know how to do bookkeeping. I can get into Xero and Free Agent and everything else and do bookkeeping. I can even do manual bookkeeping because I learned how to do it. And yet a bookkeeper can do accounts, financial statements, and tax advice and other things because they learn how to do some of that stuff. So there's a crossover, a blending of skills. And what I wonder, and I mean, this is by no means a prediction, but what I wonder is like, if I go back to the car analogy, right? When you drive your car and something starts rattling or squeaking or grating against it, what do you do with that? Well, you don't fix it because you don't have the skills to do it unless you're unusual. So what you do is you take it to a car mechanic to fix. And I wonder if like where we're going in the future may be that as an accountant, maybe I'll start to place more reliance and have a better relationship with bookkeepers, because when things start going wrong in the accounting system, maybe because I'm no longer that person that can do that, I would hand it off to a bookkeeper because they're the specialist in fixing the double entry and they're the specialist in getting the records and everything else more accurate and reliable. And they'll be super powered by technology and a bunch of other things, but maybe that's where we're heading. Maybe we're going to have to be more specialist as we go forward. I know a lot of people have an opinion on this in terms of we're going to have to focus in on the personal skills and the so-called soft skills and everything else and relationship building. Absolutely, that's a part of it, but that's always been a part of good quality accounting and everything else.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
you've got to
absolutely
remember
right.
that is always flipped on its head, because it's always correlated to advisory services. And yet not every business wants advisory services. Some businesses just want to be compliant. They want to know that HMRC and Companies House and everyone else is not going to come after them and charge them fines and penalties and everything else. They just want to know that, I've given that to someone, they're reliable, they can get the job done, and they can get the accounts and the tax and everything else right, and it's done on time without any risk to my business.
Is it filed correctly? What is my tax bill? What do I have to pay you? And
Exactly.
also that clarity around me paying you as an accountant is not insurance against tax.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when it comes to compliance skills, do you need good interpersonal skills? Yeah, of course you do, because you need to be able to communicate. But it's a different skill set from like doing kind of advisory, the advisory stuff that we so often talk about. And yet at the same time, those compliance-led only clients will come to you occasionally and say, "Look, this is happening in my life. Can you help me out?" And so, for me, advisory is still quite an ad hoc service for a lot of businesses, a lot of
Yep.
accountants and bookkeepers. Yeah, so yeah, we're all over the place, I guess. I see that Marcus has asked an amazing question.
It's us two. I think there's part one and there's another part as well. So what do you think about this?
I mean, for me, fundamentally, if you don't know what your systems and processes look like, you're never going to make the most of either the technology that you've got or the technology you would like to have. So you've really got to get across that. And the bigger you are, the more complex and difficult that becomes, because you end up being either departmentalized or multi-site or multi-manager or multi-partner, et cetera, and everyone has their own nuance. And we're delightfully lazy as human beings. So when we find a process that we don't like or doesn't work for us, we're bloody clever, and that's the problem. And we create workarounds and solutions to those problems, and we kind of fix the things that maybe shouldn't be fixed because they shouldn't be broken in the first place. And so that's kind of where you get to with a lot of stuff. So we've done it internally with the firm before, where we talked like our accounts team and sat down, and I think the partners and some of the managers, when we did that, were mildly shocked about some of the working practices that we had. Not that they were bad working practices, but just that they were
different,
what they perceived them to be. And the great thing is like, they don't communicate about this. So when someone finds a shortcut, across the team of 30 odd people, they don't say, "Oh, do you know what? I found this amazing way of doing this like 10 times quicker. Everyone should do it." They just keep it to themselves. Yeah.
How is John getting out on time everywhere? We're all here till 8 o'clock, and he's there. Yeah, I've done twice as much work in half as much time, and I'm going on holiday. Yeah. I think I always it saddens me that we are in a place nearly 20 years into like the cloud era of online accounting for small businesses, that we are in a place where there still feels like the overwhelming majority are reflected by Marcus's comment here, and that it's still a challenge, right? And I don't mean that and that's not, I'm not blaming the accountants for that. Like, it just saddens me that and the bookkeepers, but the overall position, and you put it earlier, the gap between the best and the ones that are that are struggling feels like it's probably bigger than we would probably have hoped that it would have been. And there's I don't like not all the word blame, but it just would be nice to find ways to help to improve that. I always say to people with these types of things that, like, when you're putting together the technology that you use in your firm, that exactly like you've just said, mate, you really need to first understand like the process that you have in existence already, or if you're starting from scratch, like what you think that process is going to look like, and obviously it will change, but what you think that process is going to look like, and understand like specifically what are the problems that you're trying to solve, and then look for solutions that stitch together and that solve those various problems along the chain of acquiring customer through all the way through to to completing filings and and having a sustained sort of happy customer within your ranks. And I think that too often it's so easy to get drawn into shiny new thing syndrome and end up with a, I always remember having this conversation with a fairly prevalent person within our industry who, you know, is held up as somebody that, you know, we should be listening to. And this was a long time ago, so I think that this is probably not the case anymore, but we had this conversation and they were trying to leverage free software by their profile, and we're having a conversation about, I've been told by people that because I talk on stages and I mention this particular product that I worked for at the time, that I should ask you for free subscriptions. And they had half a dozen clients or something on the platform, but they were a small firm of, you know, like less than half a dozen people, and the owner proudly declared that they had, I don't know, it was like 60 or 80 apps or something like that in their tech stack for a firm of sort of 4 or 5 people. And I knew that they weren't using our technology well, but they were paying for more than they were using for, because they'd subscribed to a level that, you know, wasn't what they were delivering. And that situation saddens me, because I think there's just, that contributes to the I'm not quite sure where to start, because I've kind of gone and bought a solution and then tried to look for a problem or an opportunity that it presented, and you will then find yourself in that situation where you're not really adopted it properly and not really implemented it properly, and then you're perhaps trying to push it onto clients that it doesn't work for, or push it into a workflow that needs redesigning before you can really start to then lay the proper technology over the top of it. So I don't think simple in theory. It's not easy when you've got a VAT deadline that's on fire, or, you know, someone that's done something in your client that you weren't expecting, and you've got, you know, far more important things to deal with. I was listening to this podcast the other day. It was about weight loss, and this guy was an expert in you know, like nutrition and weight loss and stuff, and he was saying that the host said to him, so I was like, what's the thing, like, what is that thing that you've seen in your 30 years that really means that they do it? Like, and he said ultimately it always comes down to an exercise in priorities. And, you know, and like you said, I look at it through the lens of that particular, like, fat loss thing, because that's what I'm looking at and that's what I'm talking to them about. But that sits on a spectrum of sits on a spectrum of like priorities to that person. And to me, it's priority number 1 in interacting with them, because that's what they're paying me for. But when we actually zoom out, often it's priority number 7 after, you know, like a whole bunch of other stuff. And it's kind of similar, I suppose, right? You've got to get it high enough enough your priority list in order for it to be something that you give enough, you know, enough oxygen to, in order to get it done.
Absolutely. I mean, I have very mixed feelings on this. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. You know, we operate in a space where most of the work that we do is recurring work, and the clients will come back to us, and actually to lose a client's, you know, quite difficult. You've got to really screw up generally to lose a client. Some people might disagree with me on that, but that's my general opinion. And the challenge is that, you know, as you kind of mentioned, you've always got a deadline. There's always something going on, or the client picks up the phone and that starts to take priority. And that was one of the challenges that I faced before I changed my role into what I had, because I used to run an audit portfolio of, you know, 100 odd clients, whatever it was. And at the same time, I was trying to do like client consulting work and digital transformation work with other clients. And the challenge was that, you know, when you sort of said to one client, right, okay, I've got a project here and we're going to do it over the next, I don't know, 4 weeks, because I can see a gap in my diary, and that's kind of plan it out. The problem is that if as soon as another client picks up the phone and says, oh, hey, John, I've got a critical deadline, or I need your help with this, and this needs to be done, and it needs to be done by Friday, then that gap in your diary suddenly evaporates, and you then run out of time. I think there's a whole bunch of things that we can do better, you know, from a vendor perspective and from the accountant bookkeeper side. You know, accountants and bookkeepers, we're not good change management people. In most instances, we're not very good project managers and project management people either. We've already talked about the time challenges that we have and the issues around there. We also, you know, the reason why we end up with lots of different apps is that typically what we find is we've got one app let's wind the clock back 10 years. We'd buy free agent because we had a whole bunch of freelancer clients, and we'd buy zero because we had a bunch of small medium businesses that weren't freelancers, but we didn't want to do free agent with those clients because we didn't think it worked, and we didn't want to do zero with those other freelancer clients because it was too expensive or whatever.
Overkill, yeah.
And so we ended up with 2 different GL systems. Well, that's fine, like you can accommodate that. But then we started to get a client that grew a bit bigger, and so then we ended up with Sage 200 or something else, and then we ended up with something else. And you can see how it kind of just builds and builds and builds because the client circumstances and your business circumstances change all of the time. And
tech stack creep, can we call it that?
And you get a bit of creep, but also, I mean, the flip side of that you get is, of course, you get vendors come into market who do one thing really well and then start to just bleed out into lots of other things. You get and so you might have chosen best of breed, and then you get tons of overlap, and then it's really difficult to sort of say, right, okay, where do I start to like cut back, and actually get rid of that thing, and then is it worth doing that? Because maybe if I get rid of this product over here and pick this one and move everything across, I might be compromising on the quality of that particular set of functionality or whatever. But it might be easy for me to have all my data in one place. We don't have technical skills as accountants, bookkeepers. When it comes to technology, we're not often very good at APIs and connecting these things together. So we're very much led by you typically. And I think the vendors in the past, I think generally the market's much better now, but I think in the past, vendors have been very, very good at coming into a marketplace and saying, "Oh, hey Tony, we can save you 10 hours a day. Don't worry about it. Just roll this out, and it'll be, you'll be easy. You put your feet up on the table." The problem with that is that accountants and bookkeepers never realize that time saving in terms of like a tangible difference in their business often, because number one, we don't track the time particularly well if we are time tracking. Number two, we just bring tomorrow's work into today if we have saved time. So we don't say, right, you know what, I've saved an hour every day, I'm finishing at 4 instead of 5. All I do is go, right, what was I going to do tomorrow? Right, I'll pick up Mrs. Miggins' VAT return or whatever it is and do it in the afternoon. And
that work never ends, right? Because then
it rolls
the
on.
knock on there is then the owners of the firm find new work, and then that gets brought in, and then you end up with the split between those who are essentially remunerated on a profit share and those that get salary, and that's
you might say it on the bottom line or the top line, or you might say it in different places, but that concept of maybe that kind of that idea of working on the business rather than in the business, it's very difficult. We're service-led people. We like to make sure that our clients, our customers are happy. We like to make sure that we've tried to do the best job that we can possibly do. And so for us to kind of step back and go, do you know what? I'm not going to do your VAT return, Tony, today. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to wait, even though I said I might have some time to do it this afternoon. We then start to feel guilty about that. And especially if we then spend an hour faffing about with ChatGPT or something and then get a bit frustrated because nothing good has come of it. That is the challenge of like, how do you do this? And you see this, going back to the whole AI thing. We're seeing this in the marketplace because people are screaming out and saying, just give me examples, show me what we can do. And again, I'm gonna blame both sides of the organizations on this. As accountants, we've become a little bit, and bookkeepers, we've become a little bit lazy because vendors have been so good at giving us solutions, and you guys have been so good at giving us solutions generally in the marketplace that we're almost like addicted to that in terms of saying, we want to know what your roadmap looks like. We want to know when you're going to fix this problem for me. When's the next thing coming along? And ironically, you see it at the moment with Xero, because everyone's disappointed with Xero because they haven't been doing these great big product announcements at XeroCon over the last few years because they've had nothing to kind of shout about, because they've been fixing the infrastructure. They've been fixing the stuff in the bottom that keeps the house standing on the walls upright.
Integrating new acquisitions, which takes a lot of time, right, into stacks like Instafile and HubDoc, and will now be Sift and the likes, right? They're not. That's not a simple thing to just plug and play and change the branding. It doesn't work like that, right?
It's not. But we've been weaned onto the fact that you guys just roll out updates every 2 minutes, and blow our socks off all the time. And it's like, well, that level of innovation and creativity can't continue forever. And also, you do end up with a whole bunch of technical debt and a bunch of other things that happens in the background that you've got to deal with and manage. And so I think that then comes down to communication, communication from vendors in terms of being much more honest about where you're at. And I realize there's a market positioning challenge and there's a competitive challenge there. But I think that's that's one of the things. I mean, I'll say it, not just because you're on, but I think Free Agent have done a really good job at articulating their position in the market and articulating their change in position in the market and why you're going after integrations and what you're doing with integrations and why you're not trying to sort of create this huge ecosystem of 1,500 apps or whatever and things like that. But many are not good at that. But I think more fundamentally, and kind of maybe answer Marcus's question, I mean, I would say document your processes, which means you've got to take time out of doing the day job. And that's really difficult if you're a single bookkeeper or a single accountant doing stuff day to day, but you're never going to scale without doing that. It's also really difficult when you're a big organization, because what it means is you're going to take 20, 30, 40, 50 people maybe out of a day's work, which costs, God knows how much, when you multiply the numbers up. But without doing it, you're never going to get everyone aligned around that's like sort of that vision of like, this is what a workflow should look like, and this is how we fit it in. And I would do that. When we do this with clients and when we consult with clients on doing this, we sit down with them and we document the processes. We look at their existing technology and what they're doing. And then we kind of look at, can they either change what they're doing with the existing technology to get more out of it, which often, requires either a bit of research or a bit of knowledge about the product. And again, the challenge with technology changing so quickly is it's difficult to keep on top of.
And you log in, you go to the place you went to yesterday and you clear the notification because I need to get on with that VAT return, and you don't look at it. And then when the feedback comes around, you're like, can't believe Free Agent doesn't do credit notes. And you're like, it's done it for 7 years. It's that, and it's so easy because we all do it. Like, how many times you get shown something and you're like, oh, I didn't know it. And you're like, oh, how do you react to a message on WhatsApp? Oh, actually, you just need to update the app, and then we're all guilty of it, even though
we're incredible habit formers, right? That's the other challenge when it comes to systemizing stuff and doing stuff, because as humans, we love systemizing things because it takes the cognitive load out of our brain. And so, and again, I'll go back to a driving thing. So if you've ever driven your kids to school or you've driven to work and you get there and you think, geez, I don't remember the last 20 minutes or the last half an hour of that commute. That's because your brain's just on like almost automatic pilot, because you're a good driver and you're familiar and you've got experience. And so the cognitive load is taken away from your conscious mind, and it's almost like your unconscious mind doing it. As a learner driver, that would never happen. You would never get to a point where you went from A to B and God, I don't remember any of that, because you're sitting there traumatized, going at 30 miles an hour, going, make sure I don't clip the wing mirrors on the car, and make sure when I'm going around the roundabout and stuff, I'm in the right lane and stuff. You're always constantly thinking. And that's a challenge when it comes to technological change for accountants, because we are habit formers, we find it really difficult to transition through that. And because we're not good project managers and change management managers, we can't develop and build a program of change that works effectively. And for a lot of accountants and bookkeepers, particularly if they worked in larger firms previous to moving into their own, they've experienced terrible change management. They've experienced moving from one big suite to another, which took weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to do. And then when you got to the other side, it was like, well, it's not really much better than it was before. It's just different, just a different color.
I still defaulted to that much of the product bit that affected me on a day-to-day basis. I have this theory that the more you pay for something, the more value you perceive in it, and the more you will support your vested interest in the thing, having spent money on it, versus if you didn't, right? And one of the things that I think that has meant that this world has been that our technology world with accountants and bookkeepers and accounting technology vendors has not moved at the pace that we would have liked it to have done is because of the free implementation. So it was sort of set as a bar of like, you will get implementation and you'll get somebody to help you with this stuff, and that then some folks grabbed hold of that and went, that's brilliant, let's do that, let's get stuck into it, and others didn't value that because they hadn't paid for it, and therefore it's like, if you've paid 1,500 quid a day for somebody to come and train you on this stuff and implement it, it's probably going to be something that gets a bit more oomph behind it. And it's great, like it's brilliant that we've been able to provide that as an industry in SaaS for for the folks that have grabbed hold of it. But I do wonder whether if we'd taken a slightly more structured model on charging people for implementation, that perhaps would have got the buy-in, and therefore we'd have done this one because we've got the budget to pay 25 grand for 10 days worth of somebody's time to come and implement this, and then we'd have got that have got that sorted, and then we would have gone through all the mapping processes. We're approaching the top of the hour, mate. So we could yarn on about this for the rest of the day.
Just one thing, very quickly on that. So I kind of agree with that, but equally at the same time, I also think that whenever I've been through a change management process with a vendor, whether it's been paid for or for free, I just don't think they're very good quite often. And I think the problem is they don't hold the right of people accountable. So what quite often happens is you'll have an enthusiast who engages with the vendor, but they don't necessarily always have the power to change, or to have that power over internal change. And so what then happens is you end up with this frustrating point where the vendor comes in, they deliver this amazing training, they talk about their product and how exciting it's going to be and the change that's going to make, and then they follow up a month later with that person that's been nominated, who may or may not have anything really to do with what's going on, and they go, "What's the adoption looking like?" And they go, "Yeah, we've got 3 people on board, a couple of clients." And then you'll have another meeting a couple of months later, and it's like,
that would have happened then. That would have happened anyway. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, we got 5 people on board and 6 clients. It's like, but there's no accountability. They can't go back and say, look, Tony, you've done a shit job at this. Like tell me who I need to go and speak to make sure that we get 25 people on this product tomorrow. What do we need to change? Who do I need to speak to enforce this change, to make it happen, to draw a line in the sand, and to get over the hurdles that we're going to get to, and that's the kind of impact and stuff you're going to have. And that's drawn from my own experience doing this internally with our firm and with other firms, and with other clients. It's like you've got to get absolutely into here's the deadlines, here's the thing that we're going to work to. If you're not going to work to this, you're not going to be accountable for it. Who do I need to call out? Is it that manager there who just refuses to budge? What are the consequences for them, and why are we going to make that change? Are we going to get rid of them? Are they going to be put on a PIP? Are we going to have some kind of other issue to deal with? That's how serious you've got to get into when it comes to change management. And the problem is the vendors don't often have that leverage to be able to do that.
No, absolutely. And I guess if you can't get to a place where that level of seriousness is bought into by the firm, then maybe is that the answer? I don't know. It's going to take certainly longer, if not be achievable. So yeah, I'd agree with you. It does require accountability and the right owners and sponsors within the firms to make sure that this is something we are doing, and that's the end of it. We're doing it. I've got one question for you, and then we're going to do the quick fire, and then we'll call time, mate, because you're a busy man and you've got lots to do. The question that I have is, so you are obviously extremely learned and dialed into what's going on in our world from a technology perspective. AI is obviously something we've covered in a lot of depth today, which has been great. It's nice to have a chance to kick that around. So I've not done that for a little while, which I really enjoyed. Who do you see technology-wise coming over the hill that you're excited about, that you think is going to have a big impact on what we're doing? That we might see step change from, right? What do you see that's coming, or maybe you don't?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good question. I mean, I am intrigued by what the guys at Digits in the US are doing. And there is a sort of an overlap and a similarity in some respects with what Genesis and Briefcase are doing, for example. But I think the fact that they've kind of gone down the route of creating their own GL to kind of power AI and the automations that they're building there is fascinating. I mean, the US in its own way is its own kind of unique market, and that might not play out quite as neatly and as easily over here in the UK. And
do you feel like there's a bit more of that coming our way from the US now than there has been historically? Because
sure.
the flow's always been like kind of New Zealand, Australia, a bit of South Africa into the UK, and that was our bubble, right?
Yeah,
but it does feel like the US is starting to come this way a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. I think they've realized that there's a great opportunity to move into this market. I mean, obviously, there's no language barrier. The biggest barrier typically is VAT, because they just don't get it.
Yeah.
I've seen so many apps from the US just come over here and screw that up right royally. But Digits intrigues me, and I know they've got their critics and stuff, and they're very valid, those critics. But it does intrigue me in terms of the way that they're built up. I think the one challenge that I have around a lot of these AI-powered kind of either GLs or bookkeeping solutions is that if you've got a really nailed down process. So I'll talk about our process. We do bookkeeping with Xero and with Dext, a little bit of approval max layered over the top, and it's a super slick process. And for me to change from that to say a Genesis, for example, and this is not a criticism of Genesis, but for me to change from that to Genesis, we're talking, I'm making really marginal gains. I might be saving a second per transaction, possibly, and I haven't measured this properly, and I don't. But this is just purely for example. But if I'm saving a second per transaction, like how many transactions do I need to be processing across the bookkeeping portfolio to make it really, really valid for me to go through the disruption of not just changing internal process, but changing an external process with a client who's familiar with using Dex, who's familiar with using jumping into zero and everything else. And that's the real challenge that I think a lot of these products are facing is like, if you've got your bookkeeping absolutely nailed down with existing technology, some of these AI players coming in are going to struggle to disrupt the current marketplace because they're not doing something tangibly different.
Pain of change needs to be big. It needs to be smaller than the pain of staying the same, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
big gap there.
The other thing that I'm seeing, which I'm really, really impressed with, is a product called Normain. It's a Swedish startup. The people behind it are like super geeks, incredible people, like really intelligent, very, very impressive. They basically are dipping into our marketplace and accounting, but also finance related, banking, legal stuff, and others, and building a platform around knowledge, and then using AI to sort of not unearth that knowledge, because you can do that with ChatGPT or whatever, but to turn that into outputs in work that's really tangible. So like some of the use cases that we've looked at is things like disclosure checklists, which I know lots of people absolutely hate. They can bash through a disclosure checklist in about 30 seconds, whereas it probably takes 3 or 4 hours for just an easy one in our world. And that's the kind of stuff that you can't just roll through a ChatGPT or something, because it's not easy to do. They've nailed that, and they've done a whole bunch of other use cases they've got. So that's a really impressive piece of technology for me.
Interesting. The one that sticks out to me, and I haven't really done anything other than just kind of read his post, but is Stuart McLeod's Archie. I'm interested in that as that starts to come over our world.
Well, Stuart's a mate of mine, and he is actually a client.
And we didn't.
We look after Archie. But yeah, Archie's really fascinating, and he's just. In fact, he sent me some technical stuff this morning, which I'm going to have a read through. But again, fascinating space to be in. And I've said this to Stuart, so I don't mind saying it now. Is like, again, I'm looking at what is it he's going to bring that's going to make it convincing enough for me to want to change.
Yeah, I think I had a conversation last week with a vendor looking at bringing something in around this type of stuff, the type of stuff we're talking about, with agents programmed into it to complete tasks, and like everything that they showed me was really interesting and like looked really, really smart, and we kind of got into it, and the person I was speaking to said like, well, yeah, it does this and it does this and it does this and it does this and it just does it. It's brilliant. It's really, really good. And like, we just put it in front of people and they'll just get it and they'll just run with it. I was like, I'm going to point you to Xero's research, which shows that on average 38% of businesses are connected to a bank feed, and that's taken 20 years to get to that number. I'm not saying that there aren't people that will just get it. There's a small fraction of our industry you'll put it in front of and they'll be like, I want to implement this now. This is brilliant. This is great. But that is not the majority. This will take some convincing that this is, even if it looks brilliant, right? Right, we're going to do the quick fires and then we're going to hit close. Right, so we just ask you I ask you the questions. Dale doesn't have to put himself on mute because he's not here. I'm going to pick 10 of the 15 that I have and just give me your answers and then we will call time. So question 1, what is one skill you wish you had but you don't?
I'd really like to know how to kite surf.
Oh, that'd be cool, wouldn't it? Yeah. I'd just like to be able to juggle. Right, that's what
I can juggle. So that's all right.
Yeah.
I can teach you how to juggle. That's easy.
Thanks, mate. Just send me the YouTube clip, right? Favorite country that you've ever visited?
Probably New Zealand.
Cool place. With hindsight, what alternative career would you have liked to have pursued if you did not pursue what you currently do?
Astronaut.
Yeah,
I've always said I'm an alphabetically challenged astronaut, and I ended up an accountant before I got
there. Yeah. So you bypassed over aardvark there. What is your favorite food?
Oh, see, I normally say something Italian, probably pasta. I really like making my own pasta. Although I have got into like smoking stuff at the moment. Like
hello.
So I know Dale's really into that. But
I am as well.
Oh, really? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
there you go.
What are you smoking on?
I have a bullet smoker that I bought.
The Weber Smoky Mountain, that type of thing. Yeah,
the
very
big
cool.
one.
I did some ribs last week. I haven't done much because it's difficult for me to put the smoker on and then have to keep an eye on my daughter for an entire day. But I did some ribs the other day, and they turned out really well. So I was quite pleased with that.
No.
Cool. Okay.
I'm thinking about cold smoking cheese. That's the next thing that I want to do. That's the real challenge.
Have you seen them when they do it with the watermelon? They all smoke a watermelon.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Just looks like meat. Yeah. Nice. Favorite workout.
Favorite workout. It's probably skiing, although clearly I don't do that very often. But I mean, I do actually just really like walking. I really love walking. I do park run every weekend, and I hate myself and I hate it every time I do it. I just, when people like Ryan that I do the podcast with, he's like, I love running because I get to go out and it clears my head and I get to I think I never have that. I never have that experience when I go running. When I go out running, like from the very second that I lace up my shoes to the very second that I finish, all I'm thinking is like, I want this to end as quickly as possible.
It's quite a high bar, I think, for getting to the place where it feels like just like it's not painful. Because as soon as I start running, if there's not a ball involved, my brain goes, "What on earth are you doing? Stop this immediately. Yeah. This is terrible. What a terrible idea. Stop this immediately." Whereas when I talk to the people who run a lot, they're like, it's like I'm bouncing on, I'm floating along there.
Exactly.
And I'm like, I've never really
I just don't get it. I never get it. I mean, well, I like to think I'm pretty fit as well. So it's not like I'm like flogging my guts out when I'm running, but I just never get that. I never get that Zen moment. That's for sure.
No, I'm fit for rugby, but that's quite a different fitness to just trudging for 10K. So what is your spirit animal?
Wolf.
A wolf, nice. Mine is it's a wombat, I think.
Do you know that wombats' poos are cube shaped?
No.
Yes, they are.
Maybe it's not my spirit animal then.
Well, get some fiber in your diet, Tony. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a bit of practice. The book you've recommended the most often?
Oh wow. Probably something by Terry Pratchett, I guess.
Okay. Number one country that you've not visited. So where do you want to go to the most in the world? What's top of the bucket list?
Iceland.
Yeah, that's good. I've been there. It's really cool. Most hated grammatical error or mispronounced word?
There's quite a few. I guess at the moment, because my daughter originally grew up near Blackburn and now we live in Clitheroe, so it's quite posh here. I think probably the kind of the thing that annoys me most is she kind of uses like them and us and you and stuff, the wrong way around, and it kind of inflects it, and it drives me mad. I think the other thing that really bugs me, I'm trying to think what it is. The other thing that sort of bugs me is when kind of people use double negatives and like that winds me up to something chronic.
Yeah. Espresso. Pacifically instead of specifically. We could go on all day. This one always lights people up when we say this and they're like, oh, let me have a go at that one. Two more. What is your best ever 1 in a million trick shot? Think like hole in one, like that type of thing.
That's a really good question. I reckon probably when I used to play rugby a long time ago, but I didn't play the rugby that you play because we play proper rugby where I live, probably like a really long like drop goal or something. That would be the one like from behind the halfway line. Kind of like really.
Yeah. I on that subject of that. So I had a bit of a break from rugby when my daughter was born, and for some political reasons at our rugby club, I fell out with the coach and the director of rugby. I got called back in for one game because I was they were short, and the team we were playing were terrible. And they brought a new rule in Union a little while ago called the 50-22. So if you kick the ball from inside your own half and it goes out, it's a league copy. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. So
like most of rugby union in the last 20 years. To be
absolutely right. And the ball came to me off of the kickoff, and they just kept kicking it to me. It was just like the same kick from the same kicker to the same place, and it just kept landing on my caught 4 or 5 of them because we were hammering them. So I caught this one, and I thought, let's have a bit of fun. So every time I caught it, because I'd got quite a lot of time on the ball because it was quite a flat kick, I just passed it off to the fly off and he cleared it. So I thought I caught it and I dummied it, and their whole pack just went. And I was like, oh, brilliant. It's opened up. And then I took about 3 steps and I was like, nope, it's not opened up. The second wave of the pack are all coming in to meet me. So I panicked and was like, bang the ball. And it just sailed off down the touchline, like down the tram lines, rolled all the way down right into the corner, and then just took a little veer off turn.
Nice.
And I just contemplated retirement in that moment because I was like, don't get any better than that for a back row forward to ping a 50-22 straight off a kickoff after dummy.
It's quite impressive.
Yeah, it was.
I used to play Union when I was at college, and I used to play sort of like I used to typically like play central wing, sometimes full back. It just depends. But I was always in the backs, and just like Union used to confuse me so much because there was just never any space. Like that was like the challenge, the struggle I really had. But probably the best try I scored in league was because obviously when you play the ball in league, you obviously the player gets up and plays it behind them. Was instead of picking the ball up, I kicked it and then kicked it behind the defensive line and literally just ran straight through a gap and just touched it down.
I remember as a kid, we're getting way late here with rugby stories, but I remember as a kid, and like we had quite a good team that I played in when I was a kid, and my best mate was it was a phenomenal rugby player when we were kids, and we were hammering this team, and we had a ruck, I don't know, maybe 5 out, and the ball kind of presented. I came in, tried to sort of like get my hands on it and dive over, but it wasn't close enough, and I kind of got shunted from behind, and I could see him sort of out on the wing just by himself with no cover, so I back-heeled the ball out of the ruck, and it rolled over, and they were all just stood like waiting for the ruck, and he just picked it up and dotted it down in the corner, which I always remember as a fine moment. The final question before we click close is because we'll be on rugby stories for the rest of the day, is who should we have on as a guest? Who would you like to see us interview?
Who should you have on as a guest? I guess it depends on what kind of topic have you got in mind, or should it just be anyone that kind of springs?
Just anyone in our world of business or accountancy or technology or whatever that you think would be an interesting hour.
So, given that I spent some time with her yesterday in London, because she's on the ICW like data community board with me. There's a lady called Monica Odysseus. She works for Grant Thornton in GT, for GT in Cyprus, sorry. And she is an absolute genius, absolutely incredible. And she's all over the AI stuff. She kind of leads their AI labs and stuff at Grant Thornton. And she absolutely knows her onions. Incredible.
She sounds fascinating. John Toon, it's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, hold on. What's going on here?